We've already experienced what it's like to live as a Spartan in one of our very first videos on the channel. Today we'll explore another aspect of Spartan life, not the historical or political, but the everyday routines and rituals of the people who lived there. For the next couple of minutes, let's imagine ourselves as typical Spartans and delve into the details of their daily lives. Why were men prohibited from seeing their wives? How were decisions made through the voting system of bread pieces? And what similarities does Sparta share with the modern world? All the answers will be revealed in the next few minutes. Well, our journey will begin somewhere in the 6th century on a wooden board, which if you close your eyes, you can call it a bed. There at dawn, our, say, 23-year-old Spartan, Orpheus Dilios, will wake up and see around him 100 Spartans like him between the ages of 20 and 60. These ages are the cutoffs for life in public barracks. For before 20, Spartan children lived in separate children's barracks, and only then, after passing the hardest physical examinations, were they allowed to become full members of society. We talked about the testing process in the video, which you can find at the link in the description, and now we will note only that they were really tough. Well, at 60, a Spartan was allowed to finish his service. There is another important age figure for a Spartan. At 30, he was allowed to leave the barracks to go about his business, and sometimes spend nights at home. It was not a question of mere convention. A Spartan from 20 to 30 was completely tied to military service and barracks. Even to go out to the market for a new plate for the house or a tunica, our Nephis cannot. Or rather, he could, but only with the permission of the highest authority on a special occasion. For example, you can leave the barracks on the occasion of a wedding. This was even encouraged, because Sparta always needs new warriors. But at the dawn of the state, young people under 30 were forbidden to even think about weddings. Our Nephis is married, but unfortunately, romance had no place in this town. Until those same 30 years, no life with a wife is out of the question. The meeting is strictly regulated, and the maximum that Orpheus can do is to ask to spend the night to conceive a baby. Otherwise, until 30, the barracks is his home, even though the Nephis family has a real home. Of course, a Spartan's day did not begin with coffee, but with intensive training. 3 to 4 miles of running at dawn is not even a challenge, but a regular daily routine, topped off with training in martial arts, weaponry, and strength training. Unlike the Romans, the Spartans had no formation training as such. The boys did not consider it necessary to practice marches and maneuvers. The Spartans relied only on sheer physical strength, which crushed any opponent. So at least our Nephis had no problem with rotting on the parade ground. Though it didn't make him feel any better, by lunchtime, life was getting easier, because it was time for a sacred meal. It was called syssitia, and it was found not only in Sparta, but also in other cities of ancient Greece. The idea was that a well-defined group of people would gather daily for a feast in a certain tavern. It is true that in Sparta, the matter was as usual raised to an absolute. Syssitia here was not just a place for a snack. A group of 15 or 20 people who ate together every day was at the same time the analog of a platoon in the modern army. And to get into the group, you had to go through a selection process. It happened at the age of 20, after passing the physical test of maturity. The Spartan youth would then apply to join the Syssitia, and the existing members would have a real vote on the matter. A jar was placed on the table into which the adult Spartans threw a piece of bread. And if after opening the jar it turned out that at least one piece was flattened, the candidate was refused in joining, which of course instantly made him an outcast in the society. In a panic, one had to try to join another Syssitia. But if in one he got rejected, the chances of admission to another were tiny, and it was more likely that the poor man would fall in rights and go from a Spartan citizen to a Spartan non-citizen, which was not the worst option, for even lower was the slave class of the Helots. Ordinary non-citizens, though disliked, were generally tolerated. After all, they had to be artisans, blacksmiths, and merchants, on whom the success of Sparta also depended. But of course, any Spartan youth could not even think of such a despicable fate. From the moment they were taken from their family at the age of 7 and began training, they were taught only that a self-respecting Spartan is a warrior. Our Nephis was just that, and he successfully entered the Syssitia. Now for 40 years it has been his real family. Even if at 30 he can sleep with his wife instead of in barracks, a daily visit to the Syssitia is mandatory. This is supervised by a special overseer, the ephor, who, if he misses out, immediately complains to the proper authorities, and the Spartan also turns into a non-citizen. It is not only the food that is served in the Syssitia, because the only food available is the legendary black soup made of pig's blood, sometimes oatmeal and some bread. The main part of the meal is socializing, boosting morale, and teaching. In fact, if any of the Spartans had children under the age of 7, they were taken to lunch. The children were allowed to sit side by side on the floor and absorb adult wisdom, mostly related to the glorification of fighting spirit, modesty, and the need for training. After all, in battle, members of the same syssitia are likely to fight side by side. Related to the meal ritual and another unpleasant detail, which according to many historians and led to the collapse of Sparta. The legendary Spartan king Lycurgus, who established the set of laws by which the city lived, glorified equality, and each member of the syssitia had to make the same contribution for food. But here's the catch. Someone could have a huge land and 100 slaves and easily pay the fee, and someone like our Nephis could have only a tiny farm with a dozen slaves, and the syssitia fee for our Horcius hit hard on the pockets. There were not many ways out of the situation, unless one could get more slaves and land by becoming famous in battle or by successfully playing political intrigue. From the state treasury sponsored only 2 contributions to the syssitia for the 2 kings. All others paid on their own, and of course for late payment were instantly kicked out, received disgrace, and were turned into second-class citizens. One of the few ways out was to miraculously have 3 sons. Then a Spartan would be exempted from military service and be educated. But given that even seeing a wife is a hard thing for our Spartan, it is not easy to hope for that, and the very institution of marriage in Sparta only worked after 60. Families with an old husband and a young wife were encouraged at the highest level. Before that, even wife rental was commonplace. If it was decided at a public meeting that one's wife was suitable for someone, it was considered a matter of honor to approve their union for the subsequent birth of a child. Most often this happened when a woman was well enough to give birth to a boy. In that case, the elders and officers would hint to the groom that it was not good for such a lady to be idle, and that she had better give birth to more Spartans from that 2-meter-tall lumberjack over there. In general, as we have already mentioned, no romanticization. It is true that the situation for women in Sparta was almost the best in the whole ancient world. First, given that husbands do not live at home until at least 30, and often until 60, they were literate and encouraged every kind of education to support the economy. Secondly, unlike men, women were not limited in any way in movement, food, and alcohol. And thirdly, sons were taken away by the state at the age of 7, and their further contact with their parents was sporadic. In general, the women in Sparta lived excellent, especially if you compare with the rest of Greece, where if you heard about the desire to study or to buy wine, any husband would have ripped his stomach with laughter. Well, as for our Orpheus, after a long lunch with comrades, there are 2 options. If the leadership has no tasks, that the adult Spartan is likely to go to teach children or learn martial arts himself from the elders. If there are tasks, then Nephis leaves everything and executes them. In peacetime, the vast majority of activity was with the helots. The slaves we spoke of earlier are the main highlight of Sparta. There were 10 times as many of them as there were citizens, and they were the ones who grew the food, did the industry, and did all the economic work. But on the other hand, it was from them that the Spartans took 90% of what they grew and earned. The conflict is obvious, and the Spartans chose the only way in which they dealt with the issue of the helots. Of course, it was a matter of violence. Many uprisings and showdowns with the helots occurred almost daily, and our Spartans had to face them for sure. Once a year, the Spartans declared war on the helots and massacred the most violent ones, and during the year periodically resorted to sophisticated ways of identifying particularly dangerous individuals. For example, the kings once spread a rumor that an army was coming from Athens and there were not enough troops. The news spread among the helots that 2,000 strong young men, capable of fighting, would be selected, and after the battle, those who survived would be granted citizenship and Spartan rights. Having recruited 2,000 hardy volunteers, the Spartans simply took them behind the wall and executed them. In general, romanticizing life in ancient Sparta is such an undertaking. And add to that the fact that even for a colored stripe on your clothes, your own people can execute you. Lack of any entertainment other than sports, life in barracks, even though you have a house, and it becomes quite sad. The only thing that saved the Spartans was that they didn't see any other life. They imbibed with their mother's milk laconicism, modesty, and a total desire to die for their country. Under such conditions, it's not difficult to understand the psychological block which, as it was established at age 7, never left, unless the few who survived to 60 years of age opened up and lived to the fullest. But for the country as a whole, the situation led to a natural result. Equality remained on paper, while in reality, the rich got richer without noticing any contributions, and the poor got poorer. losing their status as citizens, going into farming, and simply dying on the battlefield. It was almost unrealistic to replenish the number of citizens, given the insane number of conditions that would cause that very citizenship to be lost. So it ended with only 700 citizens left in Sparta by 242 BC, for the laws of economics could not be opposed. That's it for now. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. And also suggest your ideas for future releases in the comments. See you soon, folks.